Out of This World by Neville Goddard. Let me ask you something. Have you ever had the feeling that your real life is happening somewhere else? Not in the daily routine of work and obligations and to-do lists, but somewhere else. Somewhere just out of reach. Neville Goddard says that feeling is more accurate than you know. Your real life, your real power, your real creative force, it's not in the world your five senses show you. It's somewhere beyond that. Out of this world. Welcome to Story Reads, and today we're breaking down Neville Goddard's book Out of This World. Let's get into it. This book came out in 1949, and the title itself points to something very specific. Not outer space. Not some mystical realm you have to travel to, but a very different kind of world. One that's available to you right now in this very moment. Neville starts the book with something that sounds simple but lands differently the more you think about it. He says we have five senses: sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. And from the time we're children, we're taught to trust these five senses completely. If you can see it, it's real. If you can touch it, it exists. If it's not visible, it's not real yet. And Neville says this is the fundamental error most people live their entire lives inside of. These five senses, he says, only show you a very small, very limited version of reality. A version that's already been created. A version that's already happened. What you see, what you touch, what you hear, all of it is the past in a sense. It's already done. It's the effect, not the cause. And here's the thing. If all you ever do is respond to what your five senses show you, you will spend your entire life responding to effects. You'll never get to the cause. But there is a sixth sense. And this is the sense that creates. That's the one that matters. That sixth sense is imagination. Now, when most people hear the word imagination, they think of daydreaming. They think of something children do, something impractical, something that doesn't have any real-world weight to it. Neville says this is exactly wrong. He says imagination isn't something you have alongside your real faculties. Imagination is what you are. Imagination is the very substance of everything that exists. Every building you've ever been in, someone imagined it first. Every product you've ever used, every piece of music you've ever heard, every book you've ever read, it all started as something imagined. Imagination came first. Physical reality came second. And Neville says this same principle applies to your own personal life. Your circumstances, your relationships, your career, your financial situation, all of it started as something imagined. Maybe consciously, maybe unconsciously. But imagined first. This is what he means by out of this world. The world that creates your life isn't the physical world you can touch and see. It's the inner world of your imagination. And that inner world is out of this physical world, beyond it, before it, above it. Now let's understand why this matters practically. Most people spend their lives trying to change the physical world directly. If the job isn't right, change the job. If the relationship isn't working, change the relationship. If the city doesn't feel right, move to a new city. And sometimes this helps. But a lot of times, people change all those outer things and the same problems follow them. Because the problems weren't in the outer circumstances. They were in the inner consciousness that was creating those circumstances. Neville says the outer world is a mirror. And you cannot change what you see in a mirror by putting your hand on the mirror and moving it around. The only way to change what you see in a mirror is to change what's standing in front of it. You are what's standing in front of it. And what you are, in the deepest sense, is a being of imagination. And when you change what's happening in your imagination, the mirror changes. The outer world changes. This is the core of everything Neville teaches in this book. Now let's go deeper into what this means practically. Neville talks about a concept he calls attention. And this is where the rubber meets the road in terms of actually using this teaching. He says imagination, as powerful as it is, only works when you give it your attention. And our attention most of the time is being constantly pulled outward. To the news, to other people, to problems, to what's happening around us. We're so conditioned to look outward for information that looking inward feels almost unnatural at first. But Neville says learning to direct your attention inward, deliberately, toward a desired scene, toward a desired feeling, this is the skill that changes everything. Let's understand what this looks like practically. Say there's a man. Let's call him Michael. Michael works in a mid-level position at a company he's been at for 7 years. He wants a promotion. He wants to be leading his own team. He wants more responsibility and more compensation. Every day Michael goes into work. He sees his same desk, his same title on his badge, his same paycheck. His five senses confirm every single day that he is where he is and not where he wants to be. And because his attention is always on what his senses are confirming, that reality keeps reinforcing itself. His subconscious mind keeps taking in the evidence of where he is, and keeps producing more of the same. Neville says Michael needs to do something very specific. He needs to learn to give his attention to a completely different world. The world of his imagination. And in that world, he needs to genuinely place himself in that promoted position. Not as a daydream. Not as a wish. But as something already real. We'll get to exactly how to do that in a moment. But first, let's understand why this works. Neville explains it through the subconscious mind. He says the subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between a vividly imagined experience and an actual physical one. We've all experienced this. Have you ever woken up from a nightmare sweating, heart pounding, completely scared even though you were completely safe in your bed? Your body didn't know it was a dream. It felt the fear as real. Or have you ever imagined biting into a sour lemon really vividly and felt your mouth start to water? Nothing physical happened. But your body responded to the imagination. Neville says the subconscious mind works exactly this way all the time. And it's doing it with your beliefs, your assumptions, your habitual feelings about yourself and your circumstances. And whatever feelings and assumptions you consistently feed to the subconscious, it takes as instructions. It goes to work creating the circumstances that match those feelings. This is why changing your outer circumstances first rarely produces lasting change. Because you haven't changed what you're feeding the subconscious. The same inner program keeps running. And eventually it recreates the same outer results. The real leverage point is the imagination. Change what you're genuinely feeling inside. Change what scene you're living in your imagination. And the subconscious takes those new instructions and starts producing new results. Now let's get into one of the most important and most specifically Neville-esque concepts in this book. Thinking fourth dimensionally. This phrase sounds complicated, but it's actually very practical once you understand it. Neville says we normally think three-dimensionally. Meaning we look at where we are right now and we mentally project forward toward where we want to be. We see the distance. We see the obstacles. We map out the steps. And thinking this way, it's all very logical. But it keeps you anchored in your current reality. Because you're always looking from where you are now. Fourth dimensional thinking is different. Instead of looking toward your desired state from where you currently are, you mentally go there first. You get inside that desired state. You occupy it. You think from it, feel from it, see from it. Not about it, from it. This is the critical distinction. Let's make this real with a specific example. Say there's a woman named Lisa. Lisa is a graphic designer and she wants to have her own creative agency. Right now she's freelancing, working from home, struggling to get consistent clients. Three-dimensional thinking from Lisa's current position sounds like this. I need to build up my portfolio. I need to get more testimonials. I need to figure out pricing. I need to network more. I need to figure out how to scale from one person to a full team. I don't even have an office. I don't have the capital. All of that might be true. But notice what all of that thinking is doing. It's all rooted in the position of, I'm someone trying to get there. And that position, that identity, that's what keeps showing up in her life. Fourth dimensional thinking looks like this. Lisa, in her imagination, goes inside the version of herself who is already running that agency. Not visiting her. Not watching her. Being her. And from that position, everything looks different. She's in her agency. There's a team around her. There are clients she genuinely loves working with. When she wakes up in the morning, she wakes up as that person. From that state, there's no anxiety about, how do I get there, because she's already there inside. And here's what happens. When Lisa genuinely occupies that state in her imagination, something in her subconscious shifts. Her sense of identity starts to move. And as that inner identity changes, her outer behavior changes. The way she shows up in conversations changes. The opportunities she notices change. The decisions she makes change. Not because she forced herself to act differently, but because she genuinely became, inside, a different person. A person who already runs an agency. This is thinking fourth dimensionally. And this is the central practical teaching of Out of This World. Now Neville makes a critical distinction here that separates real fourth-dimensional thinking from ordinary daydreaming. And this distinction is the difference between something that works and something that doesn't. He says most people, when they try to visualize or imagine their desired reality, they watch it from outside. Like they're watching a movie. They see themselves in the scene as a third person. I can see myself at my desk at the new company. I can see myself on stage giving a speech. If you're seeing yourself, you're still outside. You're still a spectator. And the feeling that comes from being a spectator is not the feeling that goes deep into the subconscious. Neville says you have to be inside the scene. First person. Your own eyes looking out at the scene. Your own body in the scene. The people in the scene are looking at you, not at some version of you floating above. You're not watching yourself in that desired state. You're in it. That's the experience. And when you genuinely do this, even for just a few minutes, the feeling that arises is completely different. It's not the feeling of wishing. It's the feeling of being. And that feeling, that being feeling, is what the subconscious receives and acts on. Neville gives this a beautiful name in this book. He calls it the garment of make-believe. He says you have to wear your desired scene like a garment. You put it on. It's against your body. You feel it. You're not holding it at arm's length and admiring it. You're wearing it. And when you wear a garment, it's not separate from you anymore. It's part of you for as long as you have it on. This is what he means. When you put on your desired state in imagination, it's not something separate from you that you're reaching toward. It becomes you for those moments. It wraps around your consciousness the way a garment wraps around your body. And the more often you put it on, the more natural it starts to feel. The more familiar that state becomes to your subconscious. And the more your outer circumstances start bending toward it. Now let's talk about one of the most profound stories Neville explores in this book. The story of the prodigal son. This is one of the most well-known parables in the Bible. A father has two sons. The younger son asks for his share of the inheritance early, takes it, goes to a distant country and wastes all of it. He ends up working feeding pigs, so poor that he envied the pigs their food. And then the text says, and when he came to himself, he made the decision to return to his father's house. When he was still a long way off, his father saw him, ran to him, threw his arms around him, and immediately called for a celebration. The best robe, a ring, a party, not a lecture, not a punishment, just a welcome home. Neville says this parable is about every single person on earth. The father in the story represents your true I am, your original, divine, creative consciousness, the source of everything, abundant, unconditionally loving, always waiting. The younger son's journey to the far country represents what happens when a person forgets their true nature and gets completely lost in the world of the five senses. They believe they are only their circumstances. They believe they are defined by what they can see and touch and measure. And the far country, the place of lack and suffering, this represents the state of consciousness that believes, I am limited, I am insufficient, I don't have what I need. This isn't geographical. It's psychological. It's a state of mind. And it's the state most people live in most of the time, to varying degrees. And coming to himself. This is the awakening moment. This is when a person suddenly realizes, maybe for the first time, that they are not their circumstances. They are not their limitations. They are not the labels and the story they've been carrying. They are something much larger. They are the son of the Father. They belong to abundance. And the moment that realization happens, the journey home begins. Neville says this isn't some distant future event. This can happen right now. Right in the middle of whatever situation you're in. When you come to yourself. When you remember your true nature. When you stop being defined by the five-sense world and step back into your real identity as a creative consciousness. And when that happens, the Father, your own higher consciousness, doesn't interrogate you. Doesn't make you prove yourself. Doesn't say, I'll believe it when I see it. It runs toward you. It celebrates you. It clothes you in the best robe, which Neville interprets as the new state of consciousness you're now inhabiting. The party starts immediately. The return is complete the moment you genuinely come to yourself. Now there's a beautiful detail in this story that Neville highlights. The elder son was angry about the party. He had worked faithfully all along, and he felt it was unfair that his brother, who had wasted everything, was being celebrated. Neville says the elder son represents the logical, analytical, doubting mind. The part of you that says, that's not realistic, you haven't earned it yet, who do you think you are? And the father's response to the elder son is very telling. He says, son, you are always with me and everything I have is yours. Everything is already yours. It has always been yours. The abundance was never withheld. You just have to come into the consciousness of it. This is out of this world. Now let's talk about a teaching Neville draws from scripture that's so important he returns to it multiple times in this book. Be still and know that I am God. 4 words and then a declarative statement. Be still and know. Neville says this isn't just a nice thing to meditate on. This is a practical instruction with enormous implications. Being still, in the way Neville describes it, isn't just physical stillness. Though that's part of it. It's a kind of inner quieting. A deliberate slowing of the endless stream of thoughts, worries, plans, and mental commentary. Most of us are, essentially, never still. Even when we're sitting motionless, our minds are racing. Replaying yesterday. Planning tomorrow. Worrying about next week. Commenting on everything happening around us. And in all that mental noise, our creative faculty, our imagination, doesn't have much room to work clearly. Neville uses an image that I find really helpful here. Think about a lake. When there's wind and the water is choppy with waves, you can't see anything in the water clearly. The reflection is broken and distorted. But when the lake is completely calm, perfectly still, the reflection is perfect. Clear, accurate, beautiful even. Your mind works the same way. When it's churning with noise and worry and mental chatter, the imagination can't create clearly. What you're putting into the subconscious is fragmented and distorted. But when you bring the mind to stillness, the imagination becomes very precise, very powerful. What you place in that still space goes in deep and clear. Know that I am God. This is the second part of the instruction. And Neville unpacks this very specifically. He says the phrase, I am, is the most important phrase in any language. It's the phrase through which you define yourself. It's the creative statement. Whatever follows, I am, becomes your experienced reality because it enters the subconscious as a direction. I am tired. I am successful. I am unlucky. I am capable. I am loved. I am broken. Every time you use the phrase, I am, you're issuing an instruction to the subconscious. You're naming yourself, and the subconscious acts on that name. So, know that I am God, is Neville saying. Know that this I am within you is divine, is creative, is the same force that creates universes. Don't diminish it. Don't hand your creative power over to circumstances and blame and other people's opinions of you. Know who you are. And from the stillness of that knowing, imagine. This is a very powerful combination. Stillness plus the right use of I am plus deliberate imagination. This is the heart of everything Neville teaches. Let me give you a specific exercise Neville suggests in this book for achieving this stillness. He says start with the body. Lie down or sit somewhere comfortable. And physically let go. Let every muscle in your body relax. Let your jaw unclench. Let your shoulders drop. Let your hands open. Then bring attention to your breathing. Don't control it. Just observe it. Let it slow naturally. Each breath out, let a little more tension go. Then very gently start to let the thoughts slow down. Don't fight them. Don't try to force your mind blank. That only creates more noise. Instead, just don't engage with the thoughts as they arise. Let them pass through like cars on a highway. You don't have to get in every car. As you practice this, there will start to be gaps between the thoughts. Small spaces of quiet. Those spaces are what Neville is pointing to. That's where the stillness lives. And when you find that stillness, even briefly, that's when you gently introduce your desired scene. One specific moment. One clear image. And you let yourself be inside it, not outside looking in. Now let's talk about something Neville discusses in a way that I've never seen explained quite like this anywhere else. The world as a mirror. And I mean this as a very specific, practical thing, not just a metaphor. Neville says the outer world has one essential quality. It never, ever takes the initiative. Think about that for a second. A mirror never decides on its own to show you a different image. It doesn't choose what to reflect. It simply, mechanically, faithfully reflects whatever is in front of it. Your outer world is exactly this way. It never, on its own, decides to give you a better job, a better relationship, better health, more money. It doesn't have opinions or preferences. It simply reflects what's in front of it, which is your inner state of consciousness. This sounds like a radical claim. Most people experience the outer world as something that happens to them, as something they have very little control over, as a set of circumstances they have to navigate and respond to. But Neville says this experience, the experience of being at the mercy of outer circumstances, is the result of not understanding the mirror principle. When you don't know it's a mirror, you try to change the reflection directly. You put your hand on it and push. You argue with it. You fight it. And nothing changes because you're working on the wrong side of the equation. When you understand it's a mirror, you stop fighting the reflection and start changing what's creating the reflection, which is your inner state. And here's what makes this really powerful. The mirror doesn't judge. It doesn't punish you or reward you based on merit. It doesn't care about what you deserve or what you've earned. It simply reflects, faithfully, accurately. If you genuinely hold a consciousness of abundance inside, the outer world will reflect abundance. If you genuinely hold a consciousness of lack, the outer world will reflect lack. This isn't a moral judgment. It's just how the mirror works. And this means, conversely, that no amount of outer effort alone will permanently change your life if the inner consciousness doesn't change. You can work harder, network more, optimize everything on the surface. But if the inner state doesn't shift, the mirror keeps showing you the same fundamental picture. This is actually very freeing once you really absorb it, because it means that the leverage point, the real place where change happens, is somewhere you actually have access to. You can't control what other people do. You can't control the economy. You can't control 100 different outer variables. But you can, with practice, learn to change what's happening inside. And when that changes, the mirror changes. Now let's get into the concept of what Neville calls the sleeping beauty within. He uses this metaphor in Out of This World to describe something every person has inside them. A creative power that, for most people, is asleep. Has been asleep for a long time. The princess in the fairy tale is in a deep sleep. All her potential, all her vitality, all her beauty is there, fully present. But dormant. Waiting. All she needs is the right moment, the right catalyst to wake up. Neville says every person has this sleeping beauty within them. An immense, divine, creative imagination that is fully capable of transforming their life completely. It's not a small thing. It's not a minor upgrade. It's a total transformation. But for most people it's asleep. Because they've spent their entire lives looking outward. Trusting the five senses. Giving their creative power to circumstances. When you start genuinely practicing what Neville teaches in this book, something begins to stir. That sleeping power starts to wake up. Slowly at first. A scene you imagined actually shows up in your outer life. A coincidence that's a little too specific to be random. An opportunity that seems to come out of nowhere. And as it wakes up, and as you see more evidence that this actually works, something fundamental changes in how you relate to your own life. You stop feeling like a leaf in the wind. You start feeling genuinely like the creator of your experience. And once that sleeping beauty is fully awake, there's no going back. Because you now know something you can't unknow. Now let's talk about one of the most vivid and unusual images in this whole book. The Valley of Dry Bones. This comes from the prophet Ezekiel in the Bible. Ezekiel has a vision where he's taken to a valley that is absolutely full of bones. Dry bones scattered everywhere. And God asks him a strange question. Son of man, can these bones live? And Ezekiel gives a very interesting answer. He says, Lord God, thou knowest. Which is essentially saying, I don't know, but you do. And then God tells Ezekiel to prophesy to the bones. To speak to them as if they were already alive. And as he does, something extraordinary happens. The bones start to come together. Bone to bone. Then sinews form. Then flesh. Then skin. And finally breath enters them. And they become a vast army, alive and standing. Neville loves this story. He comes back to it in Out of This World because it captures something so important. He says the dry bones represent the desires you've given up on. The things you wanted a long time ago and stopped believing were possible. The dreams you set aside because they seemed too big, too far, too out of reach. These are your dry bones. The things that feel dead in your life. And God's question, can these bones live? Is the question being asked of you about your own dried up desires. Ezekiel's answer is the right one. Lord, thou knowest. Not, no, obviously not. Not a dismissal of the possibility. But a kind of humility that says, I don't know what's possible, but I know that you do. I know that possibility isn't determined by what I can see in front of me right now. And then comes the instruction. Prophesy to the bones. Speak to them as if they were already alive. This is the imagination principle exactly. Speak to, think about, feel about your dried up desires as if they were already alive. As if they were already fulfilled. As if they were already standing as a vast breathing army. Don't look at what your five senses confirm about that desire. How old the dream is. How many times it didn't work. How impossible it seems. All of that is the bones as they appear. Instead, in your imagination, call them alive. Speak to them from the end. Feel them alive. And Neville says, just as in the vision, they will come together. Sinew by sinew. Flesh by flesh. Breath by breath. Not overnight necessarily. But certainly. No desire is too dried out. No dream is too old. Imagination doesn't know age. Imagination doesn't know history. It only knows what you give it right now in this moment. Now let's talk about something Neville discusses that's very specifically practical and yet also quite profound. The inner conversation. He says that all day long, every person is running a continuous internal commentary. Talking to themselves. And most people are completely unaware of this commentary because it just runs automatically in the background. But this inner conversation is not neutral. It's deeply influential. In fact, Neville says it's one of the primary ways we program our subconscious on an ongoing basis. And the problem is, for most people, this inner conversation is largely negative, critical, or limiting. I can't believe I said that in the meeting. Why does this always happen to me? I never seem to get a break. He doesn't respect me. I'm not smart enough for this. This is never going to work. On and on all day. Most of it happening so fast and so automatically that you don't even notice it's happening. But the subconscious is catching every word. Neville suggests a very specific practice. Several times throughout the day, just pause and notice. What am I saying to myself right now? What's the inner conversation been about for the last few minutes? And when you notice it's been running in a negative or limiting direction, you don't need to beat yourself up about it. You just deliberately redirect it. You change the channel. Start a different inner conversation. One that reflects the state you actually want to be living in. Not fake positivity. Not shouting affirmations at yourself in a way that feels hollow and unconvincing. Just a genuine, quiet, inner conversation that comes from the perspective of the desired state. That actually went pretty well. Things seem to be coming together. I'm good at this. People seem to respond well to me. I think this is going to work out. Not performed. Genuinely felt. And over time, as this inner conversation shifts, the outer world shifts to match it. Because the inner conversation is the ongoing, moment-to-moment broadcast that your subconscious is receiving. Change the broadcast and you change what the subconscious is working with. Now let's get into one of the most specific and useful concepts in Out of This World. This is the section where Neville talks about the controlled waking dream. But in this book he goes into it with very specific detail about how to make it work. He says choose a specific scene. Not a big sprawling panorama. A single, specific moment. The specific moment you choose should have two qualities. First, it should clearly imply that your desire has been fulfilled. The scene itself should only make sense if your desire has already happened. Like a scene of someone congratulating you on a promotion. That scene only exists if the promotion happened. Second, it should carry a natural, genuine feeling. When you imagine it, there should be an emotional truth to it. You should feel something real. Neville gives the example of imagining a hand shaking yours. A handshake implies congratulation, agreement, deal-making. And a handshake has a very physical quality to it. You can imagine the feeling of someone's hand in yours very vividly. This kind of specific, physical, emotionally resonant scene is far more effective than trying to imagine a grand, sweeping vision of your whole desired life. Because the subconscious doesn't process grand, sweeping visions very well. It processes sensory, specific moments. The feeling of a handshake. The sound of someone's voice saying congratulations. The look on someone's face when they tell you the news. The more specific and sensory, the better. And then, Neville says, repeat this specific scene. Not once. Many times. In the relaxed, drowsy state before sleep. In quiet moments during the day. In those natural pauses between activities. Each time you genuinely enter the scene, you're feeding the subconscious a very clear, very specific instruction. And the subconscious is remarkably good at fulfilling instructions when they're clear. Now let's talk about a Bible story that Neville examines in particular detail in this book. The story of Jacob's ladder. Jacob was on a journey running from something uncertain about his future. And one night he stopped to sleep in the open, using a stone as a pillow. And he had a dream. In the dream he saw a ladder reaching from the earth all the way up to heaven. And on the ladder, angels were ascending and descending. When Jacob woke up, he was awestruck. He said, "Surely the Lord is in this place and I knew it not." And he took the stone he had used as a pillow, set it upright, and named the place Bethel, which means house of God. Neville unpacks this story in a very specific way. He says the ladder represents imagination. It's the connection between where you currently are, earth, the world of the five senses, and the desired state, heaven, the world of fulfilled consciousness. And the angels ascending and descending? Neville says these represent the movements between the physical world and the inner world. When you have a genuine, inspired inner impression, an idea, an impulse, a feeling of rightness about a direction, that's an angel descending, coming from the inner world down into your awareness. When you act on that impulse in the physical world, that's an angel ascending, the inner moving outward. Jacob's realization, God is in this place and I knew it not, is the moment of awakening. He was lying on the bare ground, using a stone for a pillow with no outer resources to speak of. But in that exact same place, the connection to everything he needed was present. He just hadn't known it. This is Neville's point. It doesn't matter where you are physically, materially, circumstantially. The ladder is already where you are. The connection to the inner world, the world of imagination, the world of creative power, it's present right now. Right where you are. You don't need to change your circumstances before you can access this. You access it first in imagination. And the circumstances follow. And the detail about the stone becoming Bethel, house of God, is particularly beautiful. The stone was just a rock. It was the hardest, most mundane, most unspiritual seeming object imaginable. But Jacob's awareness transformed it into the house of God. Your circumstances are the stone. They may feel hard, cold, and plain right now, but they exist in the same place where the ladder is. And when your awareness shifts, when you genuinely recognize the creative power within you, those exact same circumstances can become the launching point for something extraordinary. Now let's talk about a concept Neville develops in Out of This World that I think is one of the most important and one of the most commonly misunderstood. Living in the end. This phrase gets used a lot in discussions of Neville's work. But what does it actually mean? Neville is very specific. Living in the end does not mean thinking about the end. It doesn't mean visualizing the end once a day and then going back to your normal life. Living in the end means that you genuinely shift your identification. Your sense of who you are begins to include the desired outcome as something that already exists. Let me give you a very concrete, down-to-earth example of what this does and doesn't look like. Say there's a woman named Jennifer. Jennifer wants to be a published author. She's been writing for years. She hasn't landed a publishing deal yet. Not living in the end looks like this. Jennifer goes about her day. She writes sometimes. She submits to publishers occasionally. She talks about herself as someone who's working on becoming a writer. When people ask what she does, she says she writes on the side. Inside, she still carries the identity of aspiring. Living in the end looks different. Not in some dramatic, performative way, but in a very internal, real way. Jennifer, when she's alone at night before sleep, genuinely places herself inside a very specific scene. She's holding her published book. She can feel the cover. She can see her name on it. Someone is telling her how much the book meant to them. She lets herself genuinely feel that. Not as a fantasy. As something real happening now in this imagination space. She does this regularly. And as she does, something in her inner identity starts to shift. She stops being someone trying to become a writer, even inside herself. She starts being a writer at the stage of early career. That's a completely different consciousness. And from that different consciousness, her behavior shifts. Not because she's trying harder, but because the person she now identifies as would naturally make different choices, would present herself differently, would respond to opportunities differently, would persist through rejections with a different quality of resilience. And the mirror responds. Because the mirror is now reflecting a different inner reality. This is living in the end. Not thinking about the end from the outside. Genuinely living from the inside of the end. Now Neville addresses a very important and honest question at this point. He says someone always asks, if I'm supposed to live in the end, in a state of already having my desire, how do I deal with the practical reality of my current circumstances? And he gives an answer that's more nuanced than you might expect. He says he is not telling you to deny your current circumstances. He's not telling you to pretend things are different from how they are on the surface. He's not asking you to lie to yourself. What he's asking you to do is to stop letting your current circumstances be the dominant thing that shapes your inner state. There's a difference between acknowledging a reality and being defined by it. You can be aware that you currently don't have the publishing deal and still hold in your inner world the consciousness of the author you're becoming. These two things can coexist. What you cannot do and still make progress is to let the current outer reality completely dominate your inner world. Because then the inner world is always just a lagging reflection of the outer world. And the mirror just keeps showing the same thing. The shift Neville is asking for is one of primary allegiance. Where does your primary allegiance go? To the outer world as it currently appears? Or to the inner world of what you're consciously creating? It's a practice. An ongoing daily practice. And it's not always easy. But it's where the real work is. Now let's talk about another Bible story Neville spends significant time on in this book. The story of the old man and the new man from Paul's letters. Paul writes to the church at Ephesus and says essentially, put off the old man, put on the new man. Neville says this is one of the most precise and practical instructions in all of Scripture, once you understand what it actually means. The old man is not a morally bad person. The old man is simply your habitual identity. The collection of beliefs, assumptions, patterns, and stories you've accumulated about yourself. I'm someone who has trouble with money. I'm not the kind of person who gets those opportunities. I've always struggled with relationships. I'm not naturally confident. These aren't character flaws necessarily. They're just old. They were formed by experience, mostly early experience. And they run automatically. And because they run automatically, the subconscious keeps producing experiences that confirm them. The new man is the identity you consciously choose. Not the identity you've inherited from your history. The one you deliberately put on. And Neville says you put it on the same way you put on the garment of make-believe. Through imagination. through genuinely occupying the consciousness of the person you intend to be. Every time you enter that specific scene and feel it from the inside, you're putting on the new man. For those minutes, you're not the old habitual identity. You're the new one. And the more you do this, the more the new man becomes natural. The more familiar that consciousness feels. The more the subconscious starts working from that identity rather than the old one. And the outer circumstances have no choice but to follow. Because they're just the mirror. And the mirror is looking at something new. Let me give you a very real example of how this works in practice. Let's say there's a guy named Dave. Dave grew up in a household where his parents were constantly stressed about money. There was always this low-grade anxiety about whether there would be enough. He internalized that. Became his old man. The person who's always a little worried about money, always a little tight, always assuming there won't be quite enough. Even now, as an adult, even when Dave's finances are actually fine by any objective measure, that old anxiety is there. And it shapes decisions. He doesn't take certain opportunities because they feel risky. He doesn't invest in himself because, what if? He doesn't price his services confidently because he doesn't actually feel worth it. This is the old man. And it has nothing to do with the current facts. It's a consciousness. Dave's new man might feel like this. Someone who's relaxed about resources. Someone who knows that when he invests wisely, things work out. Someone who prices his work at its real value and feels genuinely okay about that. When Dave deliberately, in imagination, occupies that consciousness even briefly, something in his subconscious starts updating. Slowly. Not overnight. But consistently. And those old anxiety-driven decisions start to feel less automatic. New options start to appear natural. This is the practical application of put on the new man. Now let's talk about the story of the wedding at Cana. Because Neville reads this story in a way that I've never encountered anywhere else, and it's one of the most practically useful interpretations in the book. The story. Jesus and his disciples are at a wedding in the village of Cana in Galilee. At some point during the wedding, the wine runs out. Mary, Jesus' mother, comes to him and says, "They have no wine." Jesus' response is famously a little puzzling. He says, "Woman, what have I to do with thee? Mine hour is not yet come." Which sounds like a refusal. But then Mary turns to the servants and says, "Whatsoever he saith unto you, do it." And Jesus tells the servants to fill 6 large stone water jars with water. They fill them to the brim. Then he tells them to draw some out and take it to the master of the feast. And when the master tastes it, it has become wine. Excellent wine. Better wine than what was served at the beginning of the celebration. Neville's interpretation of this story is very specific and very practical. He says the water represents your ordinary, unfilled desires. The flat, plain, tasteless state of things as they currently are. Life before the transformation. The wine represents the fulfilled desire. Rich, satisfying, full of life and joy and flavor. The state you actually want. And the instruction, fill the jars with water, means fill up your imagination. Don't wait for the transformation to be visible first. Don't wait until you can see the wine before you start pouring. Pour the water first. Fill the scene in your imagination completely. Commit to it. Fill it to the brim. And then the transformation happens. Not before you fill up. After you fill up. This is the order. Imagination first. Physical transformation follows. But Neville particularly loves one detail in this story. The wine that Jesus made was described by the master of the feast as better than the wine that was served at the beginning. Typically, he said, you serve the good wine first and then the lesser wine when people's palates are dulled. But here the best wine came last. Neville says when you genuinely engage your imagination in this way, when you fill the water jars, what manifests is often better than what you originally imagined. The subconscious, in creating the outer form of your inner desire, has access to resources and pathways you didn't consciously think of. And it tends to create something richer than your original mental image. Trust the process enough to let it be better than you planned. Now let me get into a concept that Neville uses in this book to describe a very specific and very common failure in imagination practice. Lot's wife. This story is from the book of Genesis. Lot and his family were fleeing the city of Sodom, which was about to be destroyed. They were told to run and not look back. Under any circumstances. Don't look back. But Lot's wife looked back. And she became a pillar of salt. Neville says this story is not about a woman who made a bad choice thousands of years ago. It's about something that happens to every person who tries to move from an old consciousness to a new one. The instruction, don't look back, is the key. Looking back means going from your new desired state back to your old state in your imagination. It means engaging the old consciousness again. It means taking the old man back off the shelf after you just put down and picking it back up. And it's a very natural temptation. Because the outer world, at least in the beginning, still looks like the old world. You're working to hold a new inner consciousness of abundance, and your bank account hasn't changed yet. You're working to hold a new consciousness of health, and your body is still doing the same things. You're working to hold a new consciousness of your desired relationship, and that person is still behaving exactly as before. And the temptation is to look back. To go back to what feels proven by the evidence. To let the 5 sense world drag your consciousness back to Sodom. Neville says becoming a pillar of salt represents what happens when you consistently do this. You become frozen. Stuck in between. Not fully in the new state, not fully in the old. Crystallized in indecision and doubt. Unable to move in either direction. The instruction is clear. Don't look back. When you've committed to a new inner state, when you've chosen your desired scene and genuinely begun to live in it, hold that commitment. Don't go back and confirm the old story with your old eyes. Now he immediately follows this with the story of Ruth, because it represents the alternative. Ruth was a woman who made a very deliberate choice to leave her home country of Moab and go with her mother-in-law Naomi to a new land. Even when Naomi tried to release her from this obligation and send her home, Ruth said the famous words, "Whither thou goest I will go. Where thou lodgest I will lodge. Thy people shall be my people, and thy God my God." This is a complete, unconditional commitment to a new life. A new state. A new identity. Ruth didn't look back. She didn't hedge. She didn't keep one foot in Moab while tentatively stepping into Bethlehem. She made a full commitment. And what happened? She ended up marrying Boaz, one of the wealthiest men in the region. She went from widow and foreigner to beloved wife and matriarch of a great lineage. And importantly, none of that was visible to her when she made the choice. When she said, "Thy people shall be my people," Boaz was nowhere in the picture. She couldn't have known how it would unfold. She just fully committed to the new direction. Neville says this is the model. Full commitment to the new inner state. Don't look back. Don't keep Moab as a backup plan. Make the new state your only home. And the new world will meet you there. Now let's get into a concept that Neville specifically calls out in Out of This World. The difference between looking at something and looking from it. This is another way of approaching the same distinction we discussed earlier between being inside a scene versus watching it from outside. But Neville puts a very interesting spin on it here. He says the world you are observing, the outer world, the world your 5 senses show you, is the world you're looking at. But the world you're generating from, the inner world, the world of consciousness and imagination, is the world you're looking from. Most people think the world they're looking at is the cause. The circumstances cause the feelings. The facts cause the experience. Neville says it's exactly the opposite. The world you're looking from is the cause. The inner state of consciousness is what's generating the outer experience you're looking at. This is such a fundamental reversal of how most of us think about reality that it takes time to really land. It took me multiple readings of these ideas before it genuinely shifted something in how I experience my own life. But once it does land, it changes everything. Because instead of asking, how do I deal with my circumstances, you start asking, what am I looking from right now? And what am I looking from is something you have much more genuine access to than the outer circumstances. You can't directly change what other people do or don't do. You can't directly change the economy or your past or other people's perceptions. But you can, with practice, change what you're looking from. What inner state you're operating out of. And when that changes, the world you're looking at begins to change with it. Now let's talk about something Neville addresses specifically in Out of This World that concerns a lot of people who engage seriously with these ideas. The question of time. He acknowledges that there's a gap, almost always, between when you begin genuinely practicing imagination and when the outer circumstances reflect the change. He calls this the interval. And he says this interval is one of the primary places where people give up on the practice. They try it for a week or two. Nothing visible changes. And they conclude it doesn't work. Neville gives a very specific image for this. A pregnant woman. In the early weeks of pregnancy, from the outside, there's no visible evidence that anything has changed. The woman looks exactly the same. There's no visible proof yet of what's happening. But something very real is happening. Inside. A process has started. A life is forming. And it's moving at its own pace, according to its own timetable. No one looks at a pregnant woman in the first month and says, I don't see anything, therefore nothing is happening. Everyone understands there's a gestation period. A necessary time during which the invisible becomes visible. Neville says the same is true for everything you plant in imagination. There's a gestation period. A time during which the seed is developing underground, invisible, before it breaks through the surface. And your job during that interval is exactly the same as a pregnant woman's job. To continue living well. To trust the process. To stop digging up the seed every day to check if it's growing yet. To continue feeding it gently, regularly. And to allow it the time it needs to form completely. And this requires something that's genuinely challenging for a lot of people. It requires genuine trust. Not blind optimism. Not pretending you know exactly how and when. But a real, settled trust that what you've planted is alive and forming, even when you can't see it yet. Neville is very honest that this is the hardest part of the practice for most people. Not the technique itself. Not the imagination. But the patience during the interval. The willingness to keep holding the new state without the outer confirmation. But he's also very clear about what happens when you stay consistent through the interval. The outer confirmation comes. Not always exactly as you imagined it. Sometimes better. Sometimes through channels you didn't anticipate. But the inner work doesn't go unmatched. Now let's talk about the concept of states of consciousness. Because Neville develops this quite specifically in Out of This World, and it's very useful practically. He says the different moods and mindsets and identity frameworks we move through are not random. They're states. Defined, consistent, repeatable states of consciousness. And each state has its own complete world. When you're in the state of anxiety, the world looks a certain way. Threats are everywhere. Nothing feels secure. Even good things seem fragile. And you make decisions from that state. When you're in the state of confidence, the world looks completely different. Opportunities are visible. Obstacles feel manageable. And you make entirely different decisions. Same outer world. But completely different experiences. Because you're in different states. And here's the crucial thing. States can be entered deliberately. Neville says you don't have to wait for circumstances to put you in a good state. You don't have to wait until life gives you evidence of security before you feel secure. You can deliberately enter the state of security through imagination. By genuinely, even briefly, occupying the consciousness of a person who is fundamentally okay, fundamentally provided for. And when you're in that state, your behavior, your decisions, your energy, all shift in the way that a genuinely secure person would naturally shift. And the mirror responds. Let's make this concrete. Say there's a guy named Ryan. Ryan is an entrepreneur. His company is going through a tough stretch. Cash flow is tight. He's stressed and it shows. In meetings, he comes across as anxious. When clients push back on pricing, he immediately folds because the anxiety makes any certainty feel better than any principle. When investors ask hard questions, he stumbles because the state he's in is, I might fail, and everything comes out of that state. Now Ryan starts practicing. Not once, not as a grand gesture, but consistently. Every night before sleep, he enters a specific scene. He's in a meeting. Things are going well. He feels the ease of a person whose company is on solid footing. He feels the confidence of someone who knows his product is valuable. He feels the relaxed clarity of a person who is not operating from survival mode. He does this for weeks, consistently, without looking back. And gradually, something in his inner state shifts. The next investor meeting, something is slightly different. He's not as easily rattled. The state he keeps returning to in imagination starts bleeding into his waking state. And the investor senses something different. And a door opens that hadn't opened before. This is states of consciousness in action. Now let's close out this first part with a concept that unifies everything Neville teaches in Out of This World. The line from William Blake that Neville quotes throughout his work. Man is all imagination. God is man and exists in us and we in him. The eternal body of man is the imagination that is God himself. Man is all imagination. Neville takes this seriously as a literal statement about what you are. Not poetically. Literally. He says imagination is not something you have, like a tool in a toolbox you can pick up and put down. Imagination is what you are. The deepest level of you. The thing that doesn't change even as everything else about you changes. And what is imagination? It's the creative force. It's the thing that looks at what doesn't exist and holds it with enough vividness and feeling that it becomes real. And Neville says this same imagination, this same force, is what creates the universe. At every scale. Now most people would say, well, that's a very grand claim. I'm just a person. I'm not creating universes. But Neville says, look at your own experience. The life you're living right now, every detail of it, how did it come about? From the decisions you made. And what determined those decisions? Your beliefs. Your assumptions. Your habitual inner states. The things you genuinely felt and imagined. You are already creating. Every day. You've been doing it your whole life. The question isn't whether you're creating. The question is whether you're creating consciously or unconsciously. And the teaching of Out of This World is this: you can choose consciously. You can step out of the automatic, five-sense reactive way of living and step into the imaginative, creative, deliberate way of living. You can choose what you look from. You can choose what scenes to occupy. You can choose what state to inhabit. And when you make those choices consistently, the world around you, that faithful mirror, reflects back a life that matches your inner world. This is what it means to live out of this world. Not to escape from reality, but to stop letting external appearances be your only reality. To claim the inner world, the world of imagination, as your primary world. The world where your real creative power lives. And from that world, to create the life that belongs to you. So here's what we've covered in this first part. The five senses show us only a limited, already created version of reality. Imagination is the sixth sense, the creative faculty, the actual source. The outer world is a mirror that never takes initiative. It only reflects the inner state. Fourth-dimensional thinking means going inside the desired state and living from it, not looking toward it from the outside. The garment of make-believe means wearing the desired scene, not watching it. The Prodigal Son represents every person's journey away from and back to their true creative nature. Be still and know is a practical instruction about quieting the mind so imagination can work clearly. Dreams show us that consciousness readily accepts as real whatever it vividly experiences. The controlled waking dream works best when you're inside a specific scene, first person, with genuine feeling. Jacob's ladder is the connection between where you are and your desired state, and it's always already where you are. The Valley of Dry Bones tells us that no desire is too old or too dead to be revived through genuine imagination. The inner conversation shapes the subconscious on an ongoing basis far more than most people realize. Living in the end means shifting your primary identity to the desired state, not just visiting it occasionally. The old man and the new man are about habitual identity versus chosen identity. The wedding at Cana says fill up the imagination first, and the transformation follows. Lot's wife warns against the pull back to the old state once you've committed to the new one. Ruth models complete commitment to the new direction without looking back. The interval requires patience and trust, like a pregnancy, without digging up the seed. States of consciousness can be entered deliberately through imagination. And at the foundation of all of it, man is all imagination, and the imagination within you is the same creative force that creates everything that you said,